Remember you were always talking about what it was like in Holland when you were a girl.
Yes.
Yeah, and sort of try and record some of your memories of what you were doing.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Because what was your first, seeing as it's remembrance, what was your first memory of?
My first memory was, I think I was about 3, and Dick was, well, he was 2.
He was younger, wasn't he?
Yes, he was younger. And we were going out for a walk or something, and my mother said, you still have to go to sleep. And then, so I went to sleep, and when I woke up, Dick had gone out in the pram, and I was very cross about that. And I was only 3, but I still remember that.
Yeah, yeah. And you remember?
And I remember when Hans, that my brother is 5 years younger, was being born at home, and we went sent to the neighbors, and then they looked out the window and said, "Oh, look, a stork!" You know, it was still a stork. And oh yes, can you see it? Oh yes, I saw the stork. And Dick, yes, he saw the stork, but of course he didn't. And I still remember that, so I must have been 5.
And that was 1930. 1930, yeah.
Yeah, 1930.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, with remembrance coming up, what do you remember of the start of the war? Because you must have been quite young.
I remember that I was having a mock exam at school, German, and I always could, learn better early in the morning. And my father would then call me at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I would study. And I remember it was there, and we heard those planes, and I heard my father say, "Oh, well, that's war." And that I remember, and the first thing I thought, I hope it's going to be so bad that I don't have to go to school and to that mock exam.
Yeah.
Did you have to do the exam anyway?
Yeah.
Did you have to do the exam or not?
No, it was just a sort of mock exam, you know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And did you do it?
No, nobody went to school, you know, it was war.
Yeah. So it was actually, the war was declared then, was it? On the radio?
Well, it was never declared, they just invaded us.
Invasion, yeah.
And then we fought for 5 years, and then they bombed Rotterdam to sort of force us. And then if we didn't surrender, they were going to bomb another town. So after 5 days, well, you know, it was not a hope that we could, so we surrendered them.
And what preparation?
And then there was that bombardment of Rotterdam, and I still remember the windows being, you know, blown off because you put bits of paper, you know, but that was nonsense. So we first of all went opposite our house was a park, and there was a shelter. So we all went in the shelter, and then it became so bad. My father said, "Well, we better go." Very near us was a big, enormous lake, and with villages. He said, "We better go." So everybody went, and there was a woman with a baby, and I said, "Well, shall I carry your baby?" And all the time I carried this baby. And then we went, you know, people there just offered us that we could sleep there. And I remember I saw the fire, and I was thinking of Rome and Nero, you remember? And then the next day, my father said, "Well, I better go to the house and tidy up, you know, because the broken glass." And then when he went, there was nothing there. And of course there was a park, and he recognized the big tree, so he knew that was the house, but it was gone. Burned. Not actually, I don't think it was actually bombed.
Yeah.
I think it was...
Was that Rotterdam or The Hague?
Rotterdam, no, Rotterdam.
That was Rotterdam,
No,
yeah.
The Hague was at the end of the war.
Yeah. So you moved, did you? Or what did you do after that?
And then we all moved to The Hague, because the family was there.
Yeah.
And we stayed there. And then, of course, in 1945, there was very near us, where we lived, there was where they flew those, what you call them?
V2.
Yeah, that's
V2.
right. Yeah.
Where was that?
And it was a residential area, you know, it was a wood in the middle, and instead of to the left, they made a mistake. They later on, after the war, they did to the right. So, but I at the time lived with Rob.
This was the British.
45.
The
That's
British,
the British
tried to bomb the rocket site,
Yeah.
didn't they? And got the
So
wrong.
I mean, the destruction whether it was German or British was just the same. And then I lived at Rob's house, but my father said, well, we better, go out there, and they went, and then he thought, after when it had finished, well, we better go because otherwise the house might be burned down, like Rotterdam. And they went back, and he could see there was a row of houses, and the middle one was the curtains blowing out, and of course it was our house.
Yeah, the only one. Yeah.
So it was the second time, but they could get a few things out, not much. My mother apparently threw a mattress out of the window. Well,
Yeah.
why on earth would you get a mattress,
Because you couldn't carry it, could you? No. No.
Yeah.
And how old were you then?
Well, almost 20, it was in 45.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So the other one was almost 15 and then almost 20.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
And I remember, there was hardly any soap and everything. So if you wanted to do washing, you soaked them just in a pail of water. And we had a balcony, and there was a pail of water with some washing. And that, of course, survived. There was the water. So, but for the rest was nothing. And then the next day, I had a look with Oom Bob. And I still could see there was one wall, and I had and also chimney breast, and I had a photo frame, and that was iron.
Yes.
And of course, and I still could see that right on top, but I couldn't reach it, of course.
No.
I could see it.
Yeah.
So, and then of course nobody had anything, and then you got, the government gave, everybody could get a dress, if you were bombed. It was a check, either brown, blue or green. And I remember, so you could see straight away who had been bombed. They had that dress.
Oh, that's
because
interesting.
it's the second time. You have no idea what it means that everything is gone. Everything. Your toothbrush, well, you name it, it wasn't there. Yeah. So it was the second time. And then just before, because it was the end of what they call the hunger winter, the Swedish Red Cross gave everybody a loaf of bread and a packet of margarine. And when people were flying the house, all they took had that loaf of bread
Food.
out of the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have anything that you carried with you throughout that time?
Well, I was still living at Rob, and so I still had my school books and most of my clothes. So I still had clothes.
Yeah.
But my parents and Dick and Hans.
Yeah. So you were taken. Dick and Hans stayed with your family.
No, Dick and Hans and my father and mother stayed at home.
Yeah.
But Rob was, because they took all the men between 16 and 14.
Oh yeah.
And Rob was what they call, go undercover.
Yeah.
So he was hiding. So
Right.
as company, Tante Nettie said, I stayed with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And they hid in the house, didn't they, or hid in
They
the basement?
were the house, and they had a shop, an antique shop.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were successful, weren't they?
Huh?
They were successful at
Yes.
not being caught.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you see troops in the street a lot?
Oh yes, and you saw them, and I must say we didn't like the Germans very much, but I must say they had beautiful voices, and they were marching by, and then und wir fahren gegen Engeland, Engeland, and then all this bomben, or Engeland, that kind of stuff. But it was sort of, and then those boots, on the streets. It was terrible,
The noise.
hearing it.
Yeah, exactly. No. What do you think your brothers made of that time? What do you think Hans and Dick made of that period?
Well, Dick was, of course, the winter, he had to go, what they call undercover.
Yeah.
And they came and to, bang the door, see if anybody was hiding. And next to my parents' house, somebody had a cinema.
Yes.
And of course it was closed. So he said, well, Dick and a friend could stay there.
Yeah.
So they went the evening before, and Dick had a scarf, who's supposed to be a girl, and then they had to stay and they'll say, you're not to come out until we come for you.
Yeah.
So that is how Dick survived it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you remember about food? I mean, we're sitting here in a restaurant eating, but
Well, the food was, of course, not very much. But the last winter, when Arnhem, when that was a failure, the Dutch government in England had said the railway should go on strike, not knowing, it was a failure. So the Germans said, well, all right, on strike, nothing. So that was when we started eating tulip bulbs.
yes, yeah,
And everything, and oh gosh, and frozen potatoes. And it's the most terrible taste, frozen potatoes. Those were the only ones that you could get.
Yeah.
And then, of course, everything was a strike. And it was a very cold winter, so there was a lot of snow. And then on top, all the rubbish. And then you had a lot of people who were eating literally cats and dogs.
yeah.
And then they put a little notice in a shop, can't look after my pet, please, a good home. So you had the unscrupulous people say, oh, well, I look after your little pet. And then, of course, the skin, they just, I remember seeing the skins of animals just on top of that. Yes, it was a terrible time.
Nothing at all. Very cold, wasn't it?
Oh, it was a very cold winter.
Yeah.
There was a lot of snow, and of course there was no snow. Well, there was nothing. And then the rubbish, and then I remember Oom Theo had sometimes, connection of people who came to the shop, and they said there was somewhere you could get potatoes. So of course Rob was not supposed to go outside. So I went, and I had a bicycle without tires. Just on the
no
arm.
rubber, yeah.
And I remember on the rails, of the tram, you had to do it a certain way, otherwise. And I remember I had that sack of potatoes in front. And then, of course, I saw some Germans in the distance, and they would hold you. So straight away I had to sort of turn around, go to another street.
Yeah.
And then queuing for everything, but somehow,
Yeah.
And I remember there were a lot of people who came, maybe a baker who would say, well, can I get this, whatever it was, and then, you get flour or something. So we had quite a lot, and I remember, after this meal, Rob would say, I'm still feeling hungry. Tante Nettie would say, you can't say that, you can't feel hungry, you had something to eat. And Rob said, well, what shall I say then? Said, you have appetite. So Rob said, well, he said, I have hunger before my meal and appetite afterwards.
Yeah.
I still remember that.
Yeah.
And then you add, potatoes in skins and nothing.
Yeah.
And then we had a stove, but there was a little stove on top for some reason. And if you had cheese, we took the rind and we put it on the stove, and then it was sort of swelling up.
Okay.
So you thought you had
more to eat.
More to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said you remember the British planes coming overhead.
Yes, that was.
Thank you.
That was, after the Swedish Red Cross, the Germans said they would allow some planes to come food droppings.
Okay, yeah.
And I think the war was finished in May, and I think that was about April.
Yeah.
And I remember once I went to a meeting here of ex-pilots, and they were telling about, that they. Oh dear. Yeah.
There we go. Thank you.
Would you like some black pepper or some parmesan?
And I remember they said, yes, and they were asking for volunteers, volunteers, you.
To do what, sorry?
They fly those planes
Oh, to
because
fly the
we're
planes,
supposed to go very low.
Yeah.
And they said, well, those bastards, we've come through the war and we don't trust them really, but they did. And I remember he said, there were lots of people waving. I said, well, I was one of them, because he went to the roof and sort of waving to the pilot. And there was one pilot, he said he was so taken because people in stones put down, thank you boys,
Yes,
you could see.
so they could see
and
it from the air.
And this pilot was so taken, he had he took his handkerchief and put some chocolates in it and just dropped it as a little parachute.
Out of the plane. That's
And
fascinating.
some of them, they came back because,
Thank you.
to get another load. So
Yeah.
it was very interesting to hear it from the other side.
Yeah, and they British pilots, did you say, or they were
British, yeah.
yeah, but they were flying for the Swiss. Or
They were flying, well, it was on the Red Cross.
Red Cross generally, yeah.
And they're very low because when we're standing on the roof, you could actually see the pilots.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So that was exciting, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you remember of the Americans? You said you saw a Jeep, didn't you? You went in a Jeep with...
Well, the Americans, we never saw much of the Americans.
No.
Just the English.
Mainly the English came, yeah.
And
Yeah.
I tried to practice my English, and I say, and then my first sentence was, "Have you long been in the war?" Yeah.
Good, well, we'll have a break. Let you have your pizza.
Yeah.
So, what do you remember of the end of the war, when celebrations, or how it all happened, or how did you hear?
Well, it was all confusing. At one time they said it was the end of the war, and then there was still not, and we still saw some Germans on the road. But then I think it was either the 5th of May or the 8th, so officially it was 8th. And then, but it was rather, I know, the Germans were your enemy, but when you saw them being defeated and walking, it was a very depressing, and some people were spitting at them. I didn't like that, But I remember towards the end, there came a German to the shop where my uncle's shop, and he said, "Did he have a civil Anzug?" Civilian clothes,
Yeah.
because I think he wanted to desert, but you never know whether it was a trick question or not. So Theo said, nine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, did lots of people emigrate?
But after the war?
Yeah, because I mean, you know.
Yes, the young people did. There was a lot of, because Hans, he felt, he wasn't quite sure that he wanted to do in Holland. And then he had a choice of Australia, New Zealand and Canada, and he thought Canada was too cold and Australia too hot. So New Zealand, because New Zealand is a lovely climate.
Yeah, that's right.
Really very nice. So he had to go as a contract as an unskilled laborer because, he just came from the army, so he didn't have any, he had his schooling and then the army. And in the army he chose being a cook because he thought it's safest, always warm and food, and never quite on the front line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you chose England.
I chose England.
Yeah.
No, I wanted, you had been sort of, your teenage years, you were sort of stuck in the country, you couldn't go anywhere else. And there was a feeling people want to go abroad, sort of as au pairs. And I went first to Paris.
Right.
For about just a year. And then...
Great, thank you.
And then I wanted to go to England, but I thought, well, my English is much better than my French. And I was a medical secretary, working for a professor in neurology. So I thought, well, I might get a job as a medical secretary. Thank you. But the English had at the time what they called an Aliens Act.
Yeah.
And for the first 4 years, your order was supposed to be a domestic, nursing, or a job that no English girl could take.
Yeah. What I was going to ask you about was London. What was London like when you arrived? Was it still looking very bombed?
Yes, for a long time, you had those, and then typical English, they put a bench and some flowers, but it was a long time, yes, quite a lot of, because I came in, in 52, so it was still 7 years after, and it was still, some of the things were still rationed.
Yep, yeah, because you had ration cards, didn't you? Yeah.
No.
What state were the buildings in?
Sorry?
The buildings were the...
And the buildings, because of, those coal fires, were all black, you had no idea. And then the pea soup, it was terrible.
Yeah.
They call it pea soup, but you literally could not see.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I remember I had to go home one day from the hospital, and I knew I had so many stops in the bus, and you could only just see the bus.
Really?
And they were just one after the other, and I counted, the bus stop where I got off, and then I knew somewhere it was a corner, so I was just walking past, like that, and when it stopped, I knew that was the corner. I could...
Gosh, that's incredible.
And it got in your nose and in your ears, and it was terrible. They call it the pea soup.
Pea soup fog, yeah, the smog.
No.
And did you say you weren't allowed much money when you first came?
Oh, the very first time, that was in 48. Yes, I think about £5.
Yep.
So you had to do it, with that people invited you, because therefore I came for the first month, and then in turns I asked them to next year to come.
Right, because you couldn't afford anything. No. Yeah.
Well, I was, because I was at the patent attorney office, so there was a little bit, and I remember the director said, well, I'm not allowed to give you salary, but I'm allowed to give you a gift.
Yeah.
So I still got some money.
Got some money.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you have your own ration cards?
No, I was not on rations. It was... no, I don't think there were that many things on sweets and that kind of thing were on ration.
But it almost finished, had it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes, because the English were worse off than the Dutch then after the war. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I asked. Yeah. But by the time you came, things had stabilised a bit.
Yeah.
No, that's good.
But as I say, for £1 that you could do so much,
Yeah.
Well, I say, and my salary, so as a ward sister, 950. I spent for Christmas the same for...
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I worked in the hospital, and one of the nurses said she was trained. She said she had an address. She said, I quite would like to go to England. And I thought, well, I only go for 3 months, like that.
Yeah.
So we wrote an address. And of course it was a psychiatric teaching hospital, but it had a wing with Guy's Hospital, neurosurgical.
Yeah.
So I didn't know it was a mental hospital. So we wrote, and I remember I wrote to the matron. I wanted to say that that friend of mine was qualified. So I said my friend is certified.
Yeah, certified in a mental hospital.
But I'm not.
Yeah.
Anyway, and that nurse in the end she backed out. But I got a very nice letter from the matron, and I thought, well, I'll have a go at it. And my father was very cross because my job was quite prestigious, secretary for a professor. And he said, well, you go to the right place, the mental hospital.
Yeah. But you ended up as a ward sister anyway, didn't you, in the end?
In the end, I was. So I was there for 3 months. But it was very nice. We had a group of only 9 nurses, and there were 2 French, 1 Australian, and 1 Irish. There was only 1 English nurse, and it was very nice and very interesting lectures we got.
Thank you.
So I liked it very much. And then they said if you stayed for a year. Oh yes, and I met some Dutch nurses who were there. They said, because I started the 1st of January, they said, well, you must make an English Christmas. It's fun in hospital. So I thought, well, I just stay for a year. But after your first exam, was called the preliminary, you got £30. Well, in 1955, £30 was quite a
lot of money, yeah.
I said, well, I have that, my £30. And of course, I got that. And then I sort of hang around, and after you're finished, 3 years, you got £50.
Yeah.
I thought, well, I might have that's £50, you see. And then in the meantime, I made friends, and we had, instead of the nursing home, we had digs. And So there was this matron, and then she kept on saying, and when are we going to do our general? Because if you wanted to hire up, you must have your general. So I don't know. And she kept on saying, I said, oh, well, all right. And the nearest hospital was in Lambeth. I said, I might reply Lambeth. Oh, she said, you're famous teaching hospital. You must go to a famous general hospital. And she gave me addresses of St. Thomas's and St. George's. So I wrote to both of them, but St. George's was the first to reply. So that is how I did my general. That was 2 years as postgraduate. And then you had to do a year staffing. So I did that. And then I thought, well, what shall I do? And Maura, she had a flat, but she was social worker then. I said, well, either do that, or I do midwifery, or a nursing post. So I just wrote to my teaching hospital, the mortuary. I said, well, I qualified. I wonder whether there's a sister's post. You know, when you're young, you
just ask, don't you?
So they wrote a letter. And there were 2 hospitals. There was a mortuary hospital, and then you had the private hospital in Bethlehem, and that they were together. So I wrote, and they said, yes, there was a nursing post in the mortuary hospital. So I accepted that. But in the meantime, Maura and I, we moved from our digs to another one, much nearer to the Bethlehem. So I wrote again. I said, well, I wonder whether there's a vacancy in Bethlehem. Sure, if there was. But, you know, you just
precocious,
do like
but
that.
you have to,
And then I had that post, and that was after a year. I met Barry. But there were quite a lot of, you know, patients and doctors and so on. He was just one of many. But, and then when the first time he came, you know, the other nurses all had tea tray for his sister. And of course always extra cups because always the doctor came. So it was Barry was there. I said, you come at the right time. Oh yes. Anyway, and that was, and I mean, so he could have started in Maudsley.
And you started a different hospital.
It was just, and then Barry was very intrigued because I had a little travel car, you know, an Isetta. And he said, oh, whose little car, that little white one? You know, the one when you open the door, the steering wheel was on the, and of course, yes, it was his sister car. So he was very intrigued by that, you see. Yes, and that was, and then Maura and I, we thought, well, we are, what you call it, career women, and we don't want to have digs all the time, so we want to buy a house. So we did, you know, with a mortgage, and, you know, no money for surveillance, whatever, you just, but that house had been bombed in the war, so they had to for scratch, so it was not that old.
They've been rebuilt.
So we thought we'd just do that, and then we gave a housewarming party, and I said to Maura, you know, all our female friends, we must have some men. So Dick came over from Holland.
Oh, that's nice,
And then I said, well, at the moment we have just 3 bachelor doctors, because usually it was postgraduates were all married, but there were just 3. And Barry was one, an Australian one, and then a Scottish doctor. So we all, and then in turn they invited me for a show or something, and then gradually, you know, and then when Barry came to my ward, I had was a very disturbed youngsters, you know, psycho and what you call it, group psychotherapy ward, and those girls, you know, cutting their hands and burning their fingers, and there was always something. So always you had to get a doctor on duty, you know, to stitch them up. And it was often Barry. And you sort of got talking, and well, it was just one thing and another.
And you ended up being married for how many years?
Well, we were married in '65, and the dad died in '98.
So a long marriage.
I
better let you eat, I think.